why do some people never heal no matter how much they try? See, we all experience some form of pain, whether that's emotional, mental, or even spiritual. But what if I told you that some of us, even though we desire to heal from this pain, we never truly do? Because we mask the hurt, because we never address the root cause of this pain, and it keeps us in this cycle, right? Now, today, I want us to address and examine the life of David. Okay? As we understand, David was the youngest son out of just 8 boys, which led him to also being overlooked a lot. And that means he probably went through a lot of mental and emotional pains. Now, despite being overlooked, God still had favor over him and still chose him to be the second king of Israel. Now, I'm mentioning this now because I want us to see that David experienced a form of pain at an early age, which shows us that pain doesn't wait for no one, okay? David's life is marked by many moments of just profound distress, during which he often turned to God. Now, before diving deeper though, I want us to understand how pain affects us, what pain is, and how we are going to overcome it. And we're going to use the life of David to do so. But let's examine what pain is. When we look at the definition of pain, according to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. No two people are going to feel pain the same way, even if their reasons are alike, right? Which that shows us that pain is a highly personal experience. Pain is one of the most important signals to our body because it helps us survive. Pain can alert us from harmful changes in our body, but also it can help us learn to avoid something that is harmful. And from a neurological standpoint, pain is not just a physical sensation. It's also a psychological and emotional experience. So when you experience pain, your brain reacts by releasing neurotransmitters like glutamate and sustatin P, which transmit signals to your brain. However, though, your mind doesn't register this as a sensation. It ties a meaning to it. This explains why you may feel emotional hurt. And research shows that factors such as like biological, so like body changes, right? Psychological, so your mind, and a person's environment, so their social, are all contributors to how a person experiences pain. And for this reason, pain is actually known as a biopsychological experience. Now, can pain be measured though? Quick answer is yes, it can be measured. But it's not gonna be measured what you think. There's no blood tests, no scans that you can do to actually measure pain. The way that pain is measured is actually through self-reporting, right? And the reason why this is because pain is subjective and it's a personal experience. And as we dive deeper, let's examine the Hebrew definition of pain. And the reason why we are going over the Hebrew definition of pain is because I want us to understand that David was in the Old Testament, right? And since David was in the Old Testament, and 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, and then he even was in Psalms, since he wrote Psalms, right? We understand that the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. So we're going to look up the definition of pain in Hebrew. So we understand that the Hebrew translation of pain is makhov, right? This means sorrow and suffering, and also, of course, pain. Now, the origin of this word is to be in pain or to grieve. Now, I want us to pay attention to this. Why is it that the origin of makhov is grief? Yet alone, why does the definition has the word suffering in it? Well, let's understand what these are. Suffering is the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. And grief is suffer grief. So this means to hurt, to mourn, or to weep. So now we understand, as we put all of this together, that pain is a self-measured mental, emotional, or spiritual discomfort that is identified and caused by the influence of one's experience, which is usually based on the environment that they choose to be in or their psychological patterns. Now, why am I using this self-created definition? Well, I'm using this because I want us to understand that pain is a concept, so it's a belief. that only we can control in the sense of our emotional, mental, and spiritual life. Pain is a feeling, which means it's temporary, but that also means it's controllable, okay? Now there's another aspect to pain called suffrage. The reason why I'm separating these two is because I want us to understand that suffering is linked to long term. Though these are synonyms to each other, I want us to see that suffering is a long-term feeling of discomfort. That's it. That's all it means. And so when you believe that you suffered long enough, you're going to begin to act out of pain instead of the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And the reason why you're going to do this is because, again, pain is a belief, yet alone it's self-measured. So you believe that you're in so much pain that the belief is actually distracting you from the source of guidance, who is actually connected to the source who heals. And this is what leads us to staying in the cycle of pain. Okay? Now hold on, wait a minute. What's the cycle of pain? I'm glad that you asked. The cycle of pain can be broken down in a couple of ways, right? It starts with a triggering event. Pain is often associated with external events such as a loss, a conflict, trauma, or even an emotional wound. Psychologically, these events they are called stressors. Okay? A stressor activates our fight or flight response, right? So when you experience a stressor, your amygdala, so the brain's emotional process center, sends signals to the hypothalamus, which then signals your adrenal glands to release cortisol and adrenaline. So these are hormones that prepare you to react, okay? This flood of stress hormones can affect your emotional state for hours, days, or even longer. Okay? And so once the stressor occurs, we identify this discomfort and label it as pain. Whether it's an emotional distress or a spiritual discomfort, this identification reinforces pain because guess what? We're focusing on it. Okay? And when we are in pain, our minds often resort to establishing a coping mechanism or patterns. So if we ever been hurt in the past, we might focus on negative thoughts, rumination, or even self-blame, which amplifies the pain, right? So studies actually shown that rumination, so repeatedly focus on distressing thoughts, can actually change our brain chemistry, okay? It can increase the activity in our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, but it can also decrease activity in the hippocampus. This is responsible for processing emotions. So this means that excessive rumination can cause us to be quote-unquote stuck in our own pain. And as you ruminate and spiral deeper into negative thinking, emotional pains is going to escalate, leading us to the feeling of anxiety, anger, depression, or even hopelessness, okay? And the more that you focus on this pain and allow it to dictate your thoughts, the stronger the cycle is going to become. And when this cycle becomes stronger, your body's actually going to react by anticipating pain even when there's no immediate cause. And then you're going to begin to live in this state of hypervigilance, right? And the pain is going to become your new normal. Now again, these are just definitions, and this is just a cycle. I want this to be broken down so well that you understand the concepts of the belief of pain and how to conquer it, okay? Now, I want us to understand what healing is. Healing is not putting a band-aid on it, okay? You don't have to be a tough guy all the time. The reason why I'm saying this is because we'll hurt, we'll experience the pain, and we'll put a band-aid on that thing and it's gonna heal itself. And we do this so much where it became our new normal. Can I stop and tell you that that's not normal? It's not, okay? Because what you're actually doing is you're acknowledging the pain, which is great. But just because you acknowledge something doesn't mean you're gonna handle it. Most of the time when we acknowledge our pain, we also are just going to bury that pain. And here's the problem with burying things in this nature. If you ever been around farmers or even, you planted something yourself like a fruit tree or something, what you'll notice, right, is that you'll dig a little hole and you'll put the seed in the hole. And then after you dig this hole, you put the seed in, you cover it back up with soil. But guess what? You don't just leave it there, right? You water it. Why do you water? Because you want it to grow. In the same way, when you bury hurt, you're burying a seed that is waiting to be watered so it can produce bad fruit. And let me tell you now, when that seed, that herb produces bad fruit, it has the potential to make you or whoever consumes it become ill. And this is where the saying misery loves pain comes from, because sometimes your bad fruit will play a role in someone else's corruption. So please understand when I say healing cannot take place if you're burying your hurt, okay? Now that we understand this, again, what is healing? Well, according to the Oxford Dictionary, healing means the process of becoming sound or healthy again. Now hold on, pay attention to this. This definition is showing us that healing is a process. So many times we put more efforts into escaping pain instead of going through the process of healing. And I want to stop to let you know now that escaping and healing is not the same thing, so don't stop getting it confused. Okay? I was on social media, and when I was on social media, this animation came up. It was an old cartoon, kind of like Tom and Jerry old. And what was happening is that this character, he was in jail. Okay? How many of you know that sometimes your pain will make you feel like you're in jail? And so let me break this down for you real quick. As this character was in jail, he was experiencing some emotional and mental hurt. And what he did was, out of that hurt, he said, I'm gonna try to break out of here. And so what he did was he decided to start digging a hole so he can go find light and go escape. And so that's exactly what he did. He dug a hole, he broke through the ground, he saw that there was light. Here's the funny part about it. When he found out that he can escape, he put on a costume to mask his identity. And as he masked his identity, he ran to this train, jumped on it, panicked, and then hopped into this TV box. Alright? Now, what's interesting is that same TV box that he ran into and hid into was the same TV box that was unloaded and put onto the back of the truck. He can see through the TV box, and he's thinking that he's home free home. He's about to, hey guys, I'm back, I broke out, we're good, right? No. That same TV box that was being transported on that truck is that same TV box that is going back to the same jail that he was just in. And so I'm telling you this story for a reason. I want you to see the amount of effort he put into escaping. He was so focused on escaping, he believed he had to cover up his identity. And most of us, we look like him, where we'll cover up our identity that God has given us to escape a temporary pain. And let me tell you now that your pain is not bigger than your identity. Okay? Understand that. And when you cover up your identity, understand that that same identity that you're using to cover up can be the same identity that leads you back to the same place where you were stuck feeling pain. And that's not healing, okay? And as we go further into this, I want us to examine the Greek and Hebrew definition of healing. Now, when we look into the Hebrew meaning of healing, it can be translated as marpe, okay? Now this means a medicine, a cure, deliverance, or plasticity. So that means not easily upset or excited. So in other words, just calm and peaceful. Now pay attention to this. This definition states that healing is a medicine, a cure, a deliverance, and a plasticity. Right? Those same characteristics points back to the source who heals. Those same characteristics point back to God. So what this is showing us already is that God is the source of healing. So the moment that you try to heal yourself, you're ultimately going to fail because you're not the source of who heals. Okay? And as we go deeper into this, we look into the Greek definition. Now there is multiple definitions, but for today's video, we're going to examine the definition or the translation iesis. Okay? Now, the corresponding entries show that this word is actually often associated with the term restore. Now, what's more interesting about this is when we experience emotional healing, new neural pathways are actually formed. So in a sense, the brain rewires itself when we process our pain and replace negative thoughts with more healthier ones, right? This is often referred to neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to reorganize and adapt. So after all of this data, we understand that healing is a process of repair in order to bring a cure, a deliverance, or a peace to oneself. Now wait a minute. Notice how the definition still has the word process in here. Which leads me to the question, well, what is the process of healing? I'm glad that you asked. The process of healing starts by acknowledging pain, okay? Please understand when I say healing begins with acknowledging the wound, whether it's an emotional or spiritual or mental thing, okay? Many people, they try to escape their pain rather than face it, but healing requires confronting it. And this is why we see in Psalms 34:18, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Yet alone, James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be, guess what? Healed. Okay? And as you do this, understand that true healing does not come from self-effort, but it comes from God, who is the ultimate healer. So the Hebrew word marpeh reminds us that healing is a remedy and a deliverance that comes from him. And this is why in Exodus it says, I am the Lord who heals you. Okay? And as we go deeper into this process, understand that in this process you have to surrender and actually trust in the process. Okay? Please know that healing is not instant. It requires trust and obedience. Okay? And so trying to heal in your own strength is going to lead to failure, just as escaping pain does not bring true restoration. Okay? And this is why we see in 2 Corinthians 12:9, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Please understand, when you're in pain, 9 out of 10, you're not at your strongest. And right here alone in the Bible, we see that when we're not at our strongest, guess whose power is made perfect in it? Okay. Healing involves restoration. Okay, this includes the transformation of your thoughts and your emotions. This is why the brain forms new neural pathways, reinforcing the biblical principle of renewing the mind according to Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Okay? And as we dive deeper, now that we understand the process of healing, we understand that healing is not just about getting rid of the pain. It's about restoring us to the state that God originally intended us to be in, which is peace and joy and strength in him. And this is why in Joel 2:25 it says, I will restore you to the years that the locust has eaten. Yet alone, Psalms 147:3 states, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Okay? Please understand that healing is not about escaping the pain, but embracing the process with God. Okay? It involves acknowledging the pain, surrendering this to God, and renewing the mind, and ultimately being restored. Now, this is why I want to examine the life of David, because David is going to give us an understanding of the pain and going through the process of healing. Because again, David was just a shepherd boy. He was the youngest out of 8 sons. He was always overlooked, right? But here's the kicker. When the prophet Samuel was sent to anoint the next king, and David was overlooked by his own father, God still saw his heart. Now I want us to understand this. And the reason why I want us to understand this so much is because please understand that pain should never define you. Pain should never, ever conquer who you are. Because the only person that can define you, the only person who gives you power and gives you strength and makes sure that even when you're overlooked, that you're still victorious, is God. Okay? And see, now David was getting young. So as he was rejected and overlooked, he felt an emotional way about it. But it gets better than that, right? Because then he goes to face the Goliath, right? And this is in 1 Samuel 17. He's still a teenager, right? And when we dive deeper into 1 Samuel 17, what you'll notice is that in verse 45 it says, you will come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. He faced opposition and doubt even from his own brothers. Yet he relied on God's strength and not his own. And by doing so, and he defeated Goliath, it gets deeper. Because now, David has to go on the run. Why? Because King Saul became jealous of David's success and tried to kill him a couple times, right? And by doing so, he was forced to flee, living in caves in foreign lands. And what was so interesting about this entire time is that David actually had the chance to kill Saul, but he refused by saying, I will not lay hands on my Lord because he is the Lord's anointed. David has so much trust in God through his suffering and his betrayal and his loneliness, yet alone his fear for his life, to where he still understood that the process is not over. And so then David began to write Psalms, right? While hiding, he said, hey, in Psalms 57 verses 1, have mercy on me, my God, have mercy on me, for in you I take refuge. As David was crying out in his distress, he shifted his focus from pain to praise. I want us to focus on that really quickly, okay? Because as we close, I want us to understand the reason why people never heal from their pain, no matter how much they try, is because they don't realize that the pain that they're allowing is also controlling their praise, okay? Don't allow your pain to control your praise. Because most of the time when you allow your pain to control your praise, you're also going to lose focus on the source during the process of healing. Okay? So don't lose focus. Whatever you do, don't lose focus on the source who heals. Because what if you did? And you became the person you never wanted to become through the belief of pain that never was healed properly. And so let me ask you something here. Is your identity worth losing from unhealed pain? Because trials are going to come. It's part of being favored by God. And that's okay. But is your identity worth losing from pain that you never addressed? Don't lose focus on the source. And don't allow pain to dictate your praise. Y'all have a good one.